This video is sponsored by Renva Turmeric Shakes, sold on Amazon. Enjoy 3 amazingly delicious flavors: vanilla chai latte, peanut butter cup, and ginger lemon drop. Welcome to the TSD Mindfulness video for teaching number 6. And before I go into what that teaching is, I'll just let you know that there are 3 teachings in this group, and the group is called The Fields of the Temperamental Body. So if you are in one of the TSD Mindfulness programs, then you have access to the chart of teachings, and you'll see that we are in that first list of 3 in the second row of the teachings. And so let's just first talk about the title of this group of teachings, The Fields of the Temperamental Body. All right. So temperamental body. Let's first talk about the word temperament. Temperament is defined as our inclinations and our emotional responses. All right. So the temperamental body is made up of 3 fields. One field is the mental field, and the prior videos have been referring to it as the mind, the mental field. And the other field is the gut field, which is associated with the nervous system. And the third field is the heart field. It's associated with our emotions and trauma. And so the temperamental body is the system of these 3 fields working together. And the way they work together is they allow us to understand our inclinations and our emotional responses. So to understand that yourself on that deep level, we can really take this closer look at these parts of this system in your temperamental body. So the first teaching is about the mental field. And so let's talk about what that is, the mental field. So the mental field is the mental part of our experience. It is our thinking. We often refer to it as our mind. But it's a little bit different than the mind. And the reason is because the mental field is more fixed in this mental space, and the mind really can move. The mind can move into the heart. The mind can move into the gut. The mind is more like consciousness. Consciousness can move, but the mental field is really very strictly intellectual, our thinking. It's our imagination, it's our thoughts, and it's our quiet when our thinking becomes quiet. And this mental field isn't the same as the brain. The brain is something tangible. It's an organ in our body, while the mental field is not tangible. It's not something you can necessarily touch. And But it is also really important to understand that the mental field can affect and does affect the brain. I mean, there is a very close relationship between the mental field and your brain. You can think about it as the software and the hardware. So on a computer, the hardware is the actual physical part of the computer that's making things work. The software are the programs that are written to allow the things to work physically on your computer. So the software is more like the mental field, the hardware of the computer is more like the brain. Maybe that analogy is helpful. But yeah, the mental field definitely uses the circuitry of your brain to help operate. And some of the ways that the mental field can affect your brain, and you can think of that as some of the ways that your thinking can affect your brain. There are several. It can affect your brain chemistry, can affect your brainwave speed. The speeds, there's these machines that will actually measure how fast or slow the waves are, your brain waves are going. So your thinking can affect that. There's something called microstates. These microstates are when a certain arrangement in our brain, certain networks in our brain are being used, and they're being used for a certain amount of time. They call that a microstate. So I think it's 80 milliseconds or longer. Once your brain is using that certain area longer, they call that a microstate. And our thinking actually affects our microstates, meaning our thinking affects how long we are using a certain area of our brain and what area of our brain that we're using. And that's important because what meditation does, it actually makes those microstates longer. And that on a very base level is why meditation is so healing, because we're actually keeping our working brain in one area for longer periods of time, which is very healing for the brain and for your emotions and for your life. So going back to how the mental field affects your brain, that's one way, is it elongates those microstates. It also um, will over time change the structures in your brain. It will actually grow tissue in your brain. So the research shows that if you meditate for 20 minutes every day for 6 months, then the certain structures in your brain will start growing. One of them being the cerebellum, which goes all the way around. And that's important because the cerebellum is important to processing your emotions. So you actually have a physical structure in your brain that's more strong and robust to be able to help you process your emotions. So those are just a few examples. I mean, there's more. There's neurotransmitters that are affected by your mental field, but you can see that connection. It's important to see that connection. So I have a question for you. Have Can you touch a thought? Can you actually touch a thought? Is a thought tangible? This is a question that scientists and spiritualists like to kind of look at and kind of ponder on the way we might answer this. Can you touch a thought? So just think about that for a moment. Uh, when I think of that question, I think of a time when I was meditating years ago, and I actually saw in my meditation things slowed down so much that I actually saw a a thought being born. And how it was I saw this like flat pool of some type of substance. It looked very much like paint, like if you took a gallon paint can and poured it on a piece of glass, that just very smooth, um, uh, goop, I guess is a good way to think about it. And what happened in my meditation is I just kind of saw that real quickly. And then I saw a shape come out of that goop and form itself. And the shape was a hammer, came into the shape of a hammer. And then that shape, that symbol, instigated a certain thought. And to this day, I don't remember what that thought was. I wish I did. But I do remember that it instigated a certain thought. So when I really slowed down my consciousness, what I saw was that the symbolic structure showed up in my consciousness and instigated a thought. So maybe that's something to think about, that possibly these thoughts are instigated in this way, which makes sense. I used to be a hypnotherapist years and years ago, and so much of what is going on an intellectual level is on a deeper level, really ruled by symbolism. So that could be one way to think about a thought. So I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier about the mental field not being the mind, that the mind can actually move. And if you read ancient texts from the Egyptian times, what they will say and how it's interpreted is that they were really operating more from the heart, like their awareness really came more from the heart. I know it's really abstract and hard to understand, but it's so cultural. Our awareness comes so much from the mental view, like everything's coming from our eyes and our head and our thinking. But it's actually possible to move that consciousness more into your heart or into your gut or something like that. And so that's why the mental field is not the same as the mind. So when I was using the mind earlier, I was kind of misusing it a little bit, but we in our culture, mind and mental field are so similar, but they're technically not, that because the mind can move. But the mental field is very fixated in this mental part of our experience, as opposed to moving into more of a emotional experience. All right. So just as a little review, the temperamental body is made up of the mental field, the gut field, and the heart field. And it makes this system, right? And the more that we understand about the system, how it operates, and we understand even more about what's going on within us and how we are operating. And so the mental field, the role that that plays in the system of the heart field, the gut field, and the heart field is the mental field is our beliefs, our mental emotions. We'll get to in more in other classes, but it's these emotions that are so much of the mind, like anger. Anger is so much of the mind. There's so much belief associated with that emotion. Creative ideas are of the mental field. Desires, what we desire, and so these aspects work together. So there's like this mini system within the bigger system, right? Our mental field is its own system of these creative ideas and these beliefs that there's working together, and then the mental field is working in this bigger system of the three fields. And traditional mindfulness practice has us focus more on the mental field, right? There's a lot of awareness of your thinking. But the TSD mindfulness practice also has a big emphasis on these other aspects of your nervous system, for example, and really understanding what's going on with your nervous system and why it's getting triggered and what that feels like when it's triggered. And so that's part of the gut field. And then also incorporated into the practice is this awareness of the heart and those emotions that are coming up, and including our past trauma and pain. And it can be very healing for past trauma because of that. So again, the mental field is part of this system called the temperamental body, and the mental field plays a role in uh, driving our inclinations and our emotional responses. So when you really take a look at what these beliefs are and what's going on in your mental field, you can start to understand on a deeper level what's driving you. So that is the conclusion to the TSD mindfulness teaching number 6, and the conclusion to this video.